school division.
I just started
That's
it now.
right. I'm sorry for those of you just tuning in, all the good stuff is over. But you know, trying to do planning and like capital investments in your school division, when the population kind of peaks and valleys is really hard, and the same with municipalities, right? Trying to figure out what rate base looks like, what it looks like to make investments is hard. So I just also want to acknowledge, if this were easy, somebody would have mastered it and nobody has. If you're struggling, it's because this is hard. So I want to introduce you to My Canada. My Canada is a population pyramid. A population pyramid means we take the entire population, we stand it on its feet, we divide it into two genders, right? So we've got blue and yellow. I don't really know what yellow is, but I'm pretty sure I know what blue is. And we say, okay, what is the relative kind of quantities of each of these groups of people? We divide it into 5-year chunks. So at the very top are the eldest people in Canada. At the very bottom are the youngest people in Canada. Now, Canada has some curves, and let's talk about them. This first curve here, this is the baby boom. These are people that were born between, let's say, 1947 and 1966. Those are post-World War II babies. Period of remarkable economic prosperity. Fertility rate goes up and up and up till it hits 4 babies per woman, and we create a population swell. The labor market loves a population swell, because what happens to the price of labor when there's surplus labor? Price goes down. We love price go down. And that was fantastic. Youth labor plentiful. All of the things were easy peasy. You wanted to hire somebody, there's a lineup around the block, holding their hats in their hands, saying, yes, please. You want me to shovel that? You've got it. You want me to sweep that? You've got it. You pay your dues, you put in your time, right? You earn your keep. There was a real sentiment about how we related to labor at that time. All of that was fabulous. 1961, however, a little bit of a dilemma. 1961, we introduced the birth control pill in North America, so in the States first, then Canada. Their curves are a little different than ours for the same reason. 1961, birth control pill. By 1967, fertility rate starts to reduce. And that creates a little waste. I don't mean waste, like wasted generation. I mean waste like it narrows in. I'm a part of that generation. So that goes from 1967 until 1979. That's called a baby bust. There were no babies built. We're a rare find. And all of a sudden, there wasn't that labor surplus. There wasn't that lineup of kids around the block holding their hats in their hands. In fact, prices started to go up and they had choice. And the labor market was not well prepared for that. And gratefully, baby boomers, they're really a competitive bunch. Whenever you have a large population, they have this low-grade, intense kind of competitiveness. Like they're just like, hey, we're just trying to eat my lunch. So when it came to making babies, they were competitive about that, which was awesome because they created a population swell. The next here. So what happens when you have a population swell hit their age of fertility is they create a population swell. So that then is called the echo. They're also called the millennials. And they would go from 1980 until 1995. Now, let's be clear. We think about millennials like they're young entrants, but the eldest of them was born in 1980, which means they're, you can say it.
43.
They're in their 40s. You can't hold on to it forever. You can't hold on to your youth forever, millennials. You're going to have to let it go eventually. You're going to age out. But here's the thing that's kind of interesting. They had a different attachment to the labor market than their parents. Just because they're plentiful doesn't mean they're the same. Now, then below that, this generation, the waste generation, underperformers, notorious underperformers, and the same thing in fertility, right? So then you see another narrowing. After the millennials is Generation Z. That's the generation born, let's say 1996 until 2010. And obviously they're just starting to enter the labor market. And there's so bloody few of them. There's so few of them. So if you are, you can imagine every human has its arc in the labor market, right? From entry-level job to like, oh, I'm a shift supervisor to, oh, you know, I'm all fancy and I run the hell out of things to, now I'm retiring and I just yell at people. That arc is really consistent. And there's not very many of them in that entry-level space. And what we tend to do then is either push them forward a little faster than we need to, or hold others back, fill the gap. And it's a real hard thing to wrestle. Here's the most important thing that you need to see in this graph. Our entire economic system and our whole kind of labor market reality, the way we structure businesses, wants the population pyramid to stop right there. And up until birth control pill, it always did. It always just looked like that. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger at the base. When we design things like social security systems, like our pension systems, our old age benefits, we build them with these following numbers. That there's 40 people paying into the system for every one taken out of it. And it looks like that when we're in that wide part here. This is not the way it's supposed to look. It's not supposed to narrow at the base. You get what I'm saying. In your organizations, chances are you want to have more frontline workers and less supervisors and less middle managers and less senior managers and so on. That's how all organizational charts look. And so when we hit this thing, it was all good, right? Until the birth control pill just sent us all spinning. And now all of a sudden, we don't know how to make our organizational charts work properly. And that's a legitimate dilemma. And it's a structural problem. This is not necessarily about good leadership, bad labor, whatever else like that. It's not about those things entirely. This is a quantitative issue. The structure wasn't designed for what's coming to. So let's go again to the next one, whatever it is.
Oh, and so I don't have your
You just-
PowerPoint up
I
here.
think you just click. I don't know how to do it, really.
Okay, we did.
We did right.
Yeah.
And then hit a button. Just click anywhere, I think. Feel good about it.
Okay, is that, yeah, that works.
Click on there and then there's Alberta. We did it. We changed it. So Alberta here, kind of in the same pyramid format that I showed you Canada. Now, a little bit smaller baby boom. Alberta's the youngest province in Canada. So she's well, she's got the childbearing hips here is what she's got, right? When you start to see the width down here, what you know is we do actually have access to a younger population of workers than any other province in Canada. You want to have hell of a time, go to Ontario right now for that. They have hell of a time because it's much narrower here and a much older population. But at the same time, though, I want you to still notice that narrowing at the base, this is our trouble. And if you're in the public school system, you're already feeling this question about like how do you hire? How do you possibly make hiring choices in this reality? How do you imagine what it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years? Because these waves kind of move through different parts of the economy. All right, let's click again. So I'm going to change the way we look at this. I'm going to take out the gender distinctions. They don't matter to me one bit. So I'm going to take the population pyramid and layer down. So on that side are those eldest people in our population. On this side are our youngest, and this is Fox Creek. Fox Creek is fabulous. Here's the thing that you can see in Fox Creek. You can see the baby boom. You can see the baby kind of weird baby bust here. There's a little echo here. But you have a different population pyramid than the ones we've looked at in Edmonton, or sorry, in Alberta and Canada. And here's why. A population begins to look like its economy, and its economy begins to look like its population. So my dad used to sell for a case. I don't know, anybody else has ever worked in a business like that. Like they used to move them once every 2 years. We've lived all over the province. I've lived in Grande Prairie, I've lived in St. Paul, I've lived in Drumheller, I've lived in Saskatchewan, you name it, they'll sell tractors. And what I noticed in doing that, hi, come on in moving all over the place is Grande Prairie has a very interesting population pyramid as well. If you get a real oil and gas town, what you'll find is that there's not a lot of seniors there. You get a real leap upward, just like this one, of those people between the ages of, let's say, 30 and 50 that do that work and do it brilliantly. And then you almost always have kind of a significant decline down. They may not see themselves living in that community forever, and that's important to consider, right? That might be where the project is right now. So let's say they're on a 2 or 4 year construction project. I might have been in Fox Creek, this is probably 12 years ago, talking to a group of people from the oil and gas sector about what it looks like to partner with the community to create major oil and gas projects to ensure that the labor disruption didn't leave the town high-centric. Because that's what happens. Once you finish a project moves on, there's no work in that community to hold up those skilled professionals. You also know that the retail side of things starts to look kind of interesting, doesn't it? So I'm gonna talk about Grand Prairie because I live there and I'm allowed to say whatever I want about it. But there's a time in Grand Prairie when you drove down Main Street, it was like there's a hotel, a truck dealership, and a liquor store. And then a hotel and a truck dealership and then a liquor store, rinse and repeat all the way down the road. Because if you have this kind of population, you cater to the consumers in your community. It gets really hard if you're a senior looking for specialized healthcare supports. It gets really, really hard if you're an entrepreneur and you have a craft that you want to bring to the marketplace. There's no community for it. Fort McMurray certainly too has a very, very weird looking population pyramid because it mirrors its economy. Anybody know the ratio of men to women in Fort Mac? It's 4:1. I was gonna say that. Yeah. So guess what you don't find are a lot of great dress stores. You know, it's just an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing. So let's try the next one. We'll take a look at some of the other communities. Here's Whiteport. Again, very, very kind of normal. That's baby boom, bus, and echo. So it has attracted a younger population. My guess is for the same reasons, right? That oil and gas economy has kind of caught a number of people and brought it in. But they're having babies here, which is good. Whiteport is producing awesome Whiteport. Let's go again. Here's Mayerthorpe. Mayerthorpe is having a heart attack right now. Here's why Mayerthorpe looks bonkers. If you have a smaller population, you need one family of Duggars, if you know what I mean here, one family of 19 kids and counting to give you a good old spike every now and then. So this is an important lesson. If you're taking a look at any kind of labor statistics, it's always to go for the law of large numbers. The bigger the numbers, smoother the curves. Because if you look at your smaller communities, they almost always look like they're in the middle of cardiac arrest. And that's not because they are weirdly unstable. It's because they're such small populations. One high production family just turns your whole curve. Go ahead to the next couple. Give you some comparisons. If here's Fairview and Valley View, very similar, hey? Baby boom, bus, and echo, love this. And you can kind of see it down here. Now, of course, Valley View is a slightly smaller population, so it tends to look a little more jagged, but you can imagine if you had the law of large numbers there, it would smooth out and you'd see a much more reasonable curve. Hit me with another one. I'll show you Edmonton and Calgary too. Here's what I want you to see about Edmonton and Calgary, and I'm apologizing in advance for our cities. Look who they've got. 35 to 39. They have them all. So I grew up, my hometown is Viking. I don't know if you've been there, it's fantastic. One of the things about my dad is one of 10, and I think I have 37 cousins, and there's a bunch of us. How many of them do you still live in Viking? 4. We're good for 4. But you get what I'm saying. The numbers don't go well for smaller communities. We tend to lose kids to post-secondary institutions and we don't get them all back. And it's always interesting because lots of kids will even say, I'm gonna go get my degree, get my trade, do my thing, work a bit, go live the world, whatever, and then I'm gonna bring it back to my hometown. There's a problem in that. I'm a huge, it's hugely important to me to have a strong, robust, stable rural community. I was raised in a rural community. That is, I think, one of the things that I hold dear as a value to have sustainable rural communities. However, it gets really, really tough because you can't create rural infrastructure without a population to support it. And you can't get a population to support it without the infrastructure. And so every time we see a rural community lose the hospital, all of a sudden we're in trouble. Because if you have one kid in your household that needs specialized medical care, they can't get it, where they have to migrate. That's right. Yeah. The other thing that's important too is how the cascade goes. First you lose a hospital, then you lose a high school. And when you point your kids on the bus for an hour and a half every day to school, all of a sudden it starts to be a bit of a deal breaker for families. And so I acknowledge that rural communities lose a great deal of talent. It's a bit of a brain drain into the urban centers. And we've got to really think about how as employers we cope with that, because it's not the most reversible trend. It's been going on since like 47 or something is gonna be a bit to turn that vote. Okay, Red Deer and Lethbridge, I popped up there, just so you saw two kind of mid-sized communities, lined up, same thing, boom, bust, Echo, you see it quite clearly. You get a college or university town too, that always have kind of a, you know, a spike here in that kind of, you know, like you want to see this spot here, like that 20 to 24 range. Because you know they're catching from all of their rural communities, all those kids are coming into college and university. Okay. This is possibly the most important thing to talk about. When you go back to the 1960s, and we do think about the 1960s kind of way, right? We remember this time when things seemed to make better sense. And they certainly did. In a number of ways. In 1960, the average lifespan of a company was 60 years. These are companies that are on the S&P 500 index. So the S&P 500 is just a basket of companies that we put together and look at them and see how they perform. And it gives us a bit of an economic assessment of the economy. It's just a random basket, so hopefully it represents a good cross section of the world. If you get a 60-year life expectancy of an organization, is an interesting thing. If you were a fan of that 70s show, you remember Red Foreman? If they said to him, "What's on your resume?" Loyalty, hardworking, dedicated. And they said, "Well, what else is there? Isn't anything else?" That's it. Because the idea was, we come out of high school, we could attach ourselves to a strong organization and grow with that organization. And so we tended to imagine a 60-year lifespan of the employee too. And they come in, let's say in their 20s, and you can imagine you might see 40-year employees, 45-year employees who put their whole careers in with one company. And when they do that, then you have this kind of time-based incentive model, right? Where every 5 years you get a little belt buckle or something awesome. And you know, once every 10 years, maybe you get a promotion, because they can't just create layers for the hell of it. But staying there and paying your dues and putting your time made sense. You get a 60-year time horizon. Loyal, stable, hardworking, security. Those are the words that we use to express our relationship with the labor market. Now let's vault forward into this next era. In this year, you can see, so 2023, 2024, we start to see those numbers shift down. And projected for 2030, that drops down to 12 years. So the life expectancy of the organization is down to 12 years. So here I am, fresh-faced, coming out of school, looking at that and going, how will I relate with that work? It's not going to be pay your dues and put in your time. I promise you that. I'll be walking in the door going, you got 12 years max. Use me or lose me. Invest in me, train me, get me moving, show me the projects, move me around, get me exposure, get me moving. Because if you let me get dusty on a shelf, I am no longer a viable candidate for any other organization. That's not a boomer issue or a buster issue or any issue. That's how humans would relate with that reality. Does that make sense? And they know it. They know it because nobody they know is retiring from the same organization they start to work with. So let's get it. Not that that's a depressing story, it's an important story. So now let's talk about this. Everybody shapes their labor market behaviors based on the labor market that they encountered. That's it. Nothing really different between a baby boomer, a buster, or an echo, not a thing. Except for the conditions around them. Were you shaped by the conditions that were around you when you grew up? Yes. Absolutely. So let's talk about those conditions and maybe in that understand a little bit about how we can interact with these people in a way that matches the reality that they're coping with. So let's start with the baby boomers. So what we want to do is tell the story of their labor market and their social conditions, their economic conditions, their political conditions, whatever else. So what we know about baby boomers, and the only thing that makes them baby boomers, they come from a fertility rate of 4.0. So the average kid had 3 siblings, and they had a much lower divorce rate amongst their parents than any other generation since then. So they typically had they had 2 parents at home, generally a single income household. So generally, if mom did have a job, it tended to be a part-time job. She could be earning, that's not that she wasn't, that it wasn't possible, it just wasn't as probable as it is now. So what you've got on average is about a 1,200 square foot house with 3 bedrooms, 1 TV, 1 car, 1 bathroom, 4 kids, 2 adults, 1 income. That is a kid who doesn't have everything they want. That is a kid who isn't probably allowed to bring much of their stuff into the house. That is a kid who has probably never had their own room, had hand-me-downs all their life, made their own lunches. Came home to a parent, did chores, damn it, because what else are you gonna do with that many kids? You put them to work. And interestingly enough, when you've got large sibling sets, they probably parented their younger siblings or were parented by older siblings. This is a kid who came home from the school bus, was told to change their clothes because they were play clothes. And then they were not play clothes. And then they were let out like dogs to play. Unsupervised, come in when you're out of light. And your parents low grade hoping you get fed at somebody else's house, right? Because that's the only way. They have no fights for food at the table. Chances are this kid has a stronger attachment to their rural roots. So you can imagine that urbanization is like a graph that just goes constantly upward. At the turn of the 20th century, so in the early 1900s, almost 80% of us would have lived close to a farm. Now only 20% of us do. So this kid, chances are, had a closer attachment to farm family roots than any generation since then. So they probably worked. They probably had some mechanical skill. They definitely were obliged to cook and clean in the house and do a whole host of chores. They were hardworking. There's no question they were hardworking, and they tended to have, like they did get jobs, but they weren't always offered jobs. And it wasn't always like go in the newspaper and find a job. It was go out there and work for people and see if you can make them pay you. So I'm out there collecting bottles, right? I'm out there showing up when do you want me to paint that fence? There's an entrepreneurial nature in this kind of an economy, right? So this generation's wandering around the world. When they graduate from high school, the kind of social contract at that time is you will move out now. We need your room. Having babies wasn't also kind of celebrated. Celebrated is a weird word to use, but it wasn't appreciated the way it is now. There were certainly no gender reveal parties, I'll tell you that. Like my dad is one of 10, and he's a baby boomer, and he's, you know, like when my grandma comes home pregnant with that 9th or 8th baby, you know, the whole family isn't going, yeah. They're going, Jesus, lady, can't you stop? Because they already can't fit them all in. They were living in a 3-bedroom house. Also in the group of 10, 8 boys, 2 girls. The 2 girls had it awesome, right? They had their room to share, just the 2 of them. My Aunt Carol never had her own room, not once. She married out of her parents' house into her husband's house. She has never had her own room. These kids weren't even allowed in the living room. And the living room was covered in plastic, am I right? And they certainly never got to decide what was on the television. There was one television and it was the property of the dad, right? They had to get up and change the channel for them, but they weren't allowed to touch it for themselves, ever. Anything they wanted, they had to piece together. They were let loose upon the earth without parental supervision or like structured play dates. And guess what they did is they made stuff up. They had a great imagination, they could solve interesting problems, and they were allowed to get hurt. Hell, they had metal tipped lawn darts. They were obliged to get hurt. Right? This generation had a very different childhood experience than, let's say, its more urbanized cohorts afterward. When they went into university or college, they were typically the first leaf in their family tree to have done that. And it was a distinguishing characteristic. Going to school, it separated you from the pack. And it was a pack, it felt competitive, right? Huge labor surplus coming to the marketplace, prices driving down, employers have choice. You get out there and get your degrees, damn it, it mattered. They always had this sense that labor was scarce. And you talk to any boomer even now, right? Secure in their role, they're just like somebody's trying to eat your lunch, trust me. Rip it. Right? They have a sense of just that kind of low grade, quiet, panicky terror that at any point in time, if they lost their work, it wouldn't be able to be easily replaced. That work was its own reward. And that mindset is interesting in the labor market, isn't it? It's awesome for employers. Awesome for employers. If you can't hire boomers, hire them all. I love them. Also very accustomed to delayed gratification. You live in a household with 4 kids and 1 income, everything is delayed gratification. No is the only word you ever hear. When you hear it at work, it doesn't panic you a whole bunch, right? You're like, yeah, of course I don't get it. Of course they get it. Handling those kinds of setbacks at work is a normal and natural part of upbringing for large sibling sets. think about this baby boomer as you have them in your workplace. I'm sure you've got somebody who looks exactly like this in action and somebody who looks nothing like this in action. Because if you're a boomer, just give me a show of hands if you are. You're born between 1947, 1966. How many kids in your sibling set? You're the only child? Were you the only child that was ever? Okay. Did you find that interesting? Like when you looked around at the people that you went to school with and grew up with, they tend to have larger families? Any other boomers? How many in your siblings have? You one of three? Okay. So here's the thing about doing this kind of thing. We shoot this average down the middle of a room, right? And say, okay, well, that's the average. And we're going to describe this one human, and chances are we miss all of the humans on either side. The question is, can you see trends in it? Can you see themes that are helpful? So we won't capture your whole experience. We won't capture your whole experience. But if we capture the general gist of that time, does it give us something to get to work with? And I want you to think about this in terms of student engagement, right? Boomers. Well, you were allowed to hit the hell out of them. Everybody's allowed to hit them. Right? I grew up, like I said, I grew up in Viking, and my dad's best friend was the local police officer. I don't know if y'all had this brick house with 2 flat roofs. Half of it was a police office, half of it was a residence. If I walked home and I got in trouble, the local cop was my dad's best friend. You think he wasn't entitled to throw me a little bit in jail? Hell, the teachers were allowed to throw me in jail. Like we really had a model where kids didn't have the same experience that they have now. Right? Engagement in the classroom wasn't nice to have. I had a yardstick. I'll have it. Different model now. Go ahead. So the baby busters. So this is the 1967 and 1979, my generation. Anybody else here a buster? Just bitter, jaded, cynical things. How many kids in your sibling set? 2?
I guess I'm 80. So,
Yeah, you're in.
but yeah, I only child.
You're the only child? What if so you held up the boomer tradition a little bit, your parents, put on them, or they just didn't get the memo. Now, so statistically, we're quite perfect. The number dropped to about 2. So now you're seeing kids coming out of sibling sets of 2. Now, this generation is a bit of if you're gonna make a mistake, I used to work as a waitress, and if you have a good night going, and then there's always that one table where everything goes wrong. If you can't get a thing out right for them, you get the order wrong, and then you got it in your head, and then the kitchen makes a mistake on their order, and then you miss them going by, and then somebody else spilled like something. There's always one table where everything goes wrong. And I always feel terrible for them because you want to say to them, like, really, I'm good, except for you. That's this generation. This is if something could go wrong and went wrong in this generation's. So this is a really small generation, first off. So here's the thing. This generation is created because of the birth control pill. What else got created because of the birth control pill was massive skyrocketing divorce rates. And this is the first generation that normalized divorce, where it was normal to have more than one last name in your household, or to have blended families, or to see your parents living separate and get 2 Christmases if you're lucky. So this generation is growing up in a very different home. So typically about 1,800 square feet, we're up to 4 bedrooms, probably 2 TVs, probably 2 cars and more than 1 bathroom. Luxury. The other thing about this generation though, is they probably have a single parent. They have as much probability of having a single parent as they do having 2. And if they have a single parent, it's a working single parent. And if they have 2 parents, chances are they both work. Post-birth control pill means women constrain fertility and engage in the labor market at their convenience. So this is a latchkey kid. They are not coming home to a parented home. They have only one other sibling to get along with, and really, you can be in separate parts of a 2,500 square foot house, 1,800 square foot house. You can find your space. They tended to urbanize too. As families broke apart, they weren't as apt to stay in smaller communities, so they moved to larger communities, which means raised in relative anonymity. The cop down the street doesn't know you. Delightful. I remember coming to Edmonton when I was a little girl. We went to the mall. We had to go to the West Edmonton Mall, right? Have a look around. I was walking with my mom and I saw leashed kids. Do you remember this? The first time you saw leashed kids? I'd say to my mom, like, I'm trying to make sense of this. Coming from Viking, of course, where we were never afraid, like, we were never afraid. Grew up in a town where I was never afraid. I'm so grateful for that experience in my life. But growing up in Edmonton, apparently there was fear, because I said to my mom, I'm like, will they not recognize their own child in a pack? Why did I have to say tethered to? That seems off. I had no ability to comprehend a world where people were so afraid of their neighbors that they thought they might take their kids. But it's bad. Hey,
Every way back.
right? Every way bad, right? But this is the thing, like, that is not a universe I could wrap my head around. And I'm really grateful for that. This is the generation that introduced itself to a real culture of fear. So that's the first thing. The other thing that's weird about us, we got into the education sector, and you can imagine, like, the school that I went to, one wing was closed. Right, the student population shrunk. By the time I was like grade 2 or 3, there were less kids in there than there were 5 years before. So they shut down a bunch of the classrooms, which is where we totally ran around, and it was awesome. But the thing that was interesting is split grades then, right? So I was in a 4-5 split. All of the education system had to shift to accommodate this smaller population in school. We got computers in school then. Did y'all get computers? Like we're the integration generation. And what we did with them is we programmed how to make the screen go from red to blue. I remember just going like, this is the big deal, right? What else? Like, you're doing it, like, I can do it, but who cares? Like, okay, Apple IIe's, here we go. The other thing that they did to us is they moved us out of the imperial system to the metric system. I didn't bother learning either. You know how you're like, I'm skeptical. My dad didn't shift either. He still hasn't shifted. He still asks me how many miles to the gallon I get. Like, I just don't measure any of the things. So I'm just like, how much are bananas per pound right now? I'm like, I don't even know. I paid $7. I don't know what that means. Just 7. There you go. I'm an economist too. Like, I'm really good with math. I just don't care about measuring. It's not that I can't do it. I'm waiting for version 3. Like, I'm waiting for them to finish. Because clearly, if Imperial was so bad, they wouldn't have brought in metric. And if metric was so good, my dad would have learned it. And y'all just switch it, like, it's like I'm this many pounds, but it's this many kilometers, and I'm this, like, in height, I'm feet and inches. But I measure, like, units of measure in milliliters. Like, I don't bother. Like, just I put in a bunch of milk, that's enough, right? We don't necessarily care. Don't care either. I'm not loyal. I'm not loyal to anything. That's my whole generation's ethos. We're just not loyal to anything, because whatever it is, it's gonna shift. I don't care. The labor market went to hell right as we entered it. I don't care about that either. Doesn't matter. Can't get a job, whatever. Can't buy a house, sure. Good, fine. The only upside for us is we're a small population. And so there was, guess what that does to labor? It makes us highly desirable. We had no problem getting jobs. We just couldn't get good jobs. Here's why. This generation, the early of us, were born in like the late 1960s. So if you think about when the economy went to hell in a handbasket in 1987, that would have been just as we were entering it. So fun for us. And all of our older brothers and sisters and older family members have made their way into the corporate ladder in those 60-year companies and hit middle management with full pension and benefits. Guess where they started to squeeze? That's the job. Full-time permanent pensionable employment is what started to reduce, and what started to increase was part-time, contract, and temporary work, what we call fringe employment. That's what my generation could get. So we all cobbled together a life on part-time, temporary, contract gigs. I have never had a single source of income. And I don't mean I've never had money coming in the house. I mean, I've never had a career where I had only one source of income. I don't believe it, because I couldn't relax into that. Because everybody I saw losing their jobs as companies downsized and right-sized made me skeptical that that was a very good bet. So even if I had like a job, I always had a side hustle, always. And most of the people I know in my generation think that way. They don't think in terms of I'm sticking out, I've got the golden handcuffs on myself right now. No, they think this is good now. This is good for the right thing. The whole paradigm of work has shifted on their watch, and they know it. And so they kind of can identify that old guard mentality of loyalty, dedication, hard work And that kind of digital mentality of, I don't know, I can outsource this anywhere in the world with a flip, flip of the mouse. A much more global mindset, but with a lot of local accountability for kind of community, environment, and so forth. They really have to live in two worlds at once. And I think it's kind of interesting when you think about the dominant baby boomer group that really set the culture. Then you get this little kind of hourglass shape, this little tiny group in the middle, oh, either way, whatever. And then, of course, that wider base of young workers. We bridge that gap. I don't know if you any of it happily. We don't care. Satisfaction is not what we aim for. Right? We just want to leave at the end of the day without feeling more miserable about ourselves. That's all. What else? Yeah, we're recession minded. You raise kids during a recession, hey, they're just miserable for life. That's all right. Go ahead. Next one. The Echoes, different group entirely, and gosh, love them. So this is the move, like the birth control pills that are around for a little while, the baby boomers. You take a competitive generation like the baby boomers and give them parenting, they're competitive parenters. There's a right way. Your kid's gonna get the right lessons at the right time. They're all gonna be prepped to be their little inner Gretzky's. These are wanted, planned children. You had them exactly when you wanted to get your $1 million family. Right? You get them organized and then you make sure that you open every door to their remarkable possibilities. And that is a fun kid to handle. Right? Because this generation, that wanted child, this is where we started to see the no child left behind kind of model, that winning and losing all of a sudden became unacceptable. This is a very, those are the baby, the teething rings that baby boomers grew up with. Is you're gonna lose. Your dad wouldn't even bring down his level of play to let you win ever. Right? Boomers know what it is to be allowed to lose, to kick the dirt and take their losing team off the ice and, feel miserable about it. And they didn't like it happening to their kids. These kids didn't come out of the womb saying, I'd like a trophy too. Their parents did. And so that whole everybody gets a trophy mindset is what happens when the boomers start parenting in a competitive way. And they have this idea because they could constrain fertility. My grandmother could not constrain fertility. I'm apparently really tracking that on my grandmother today. But you know what I mean? Like a previous generation, fertility was a consequence, not a choice. This generation, fertility is a choice, not a consequence. Babies are not a consequence. You never resent them. Celebrate them, damn it. A picture of their little ultrasound on your fridge. Put them on Facebook. They get their own Facebook pages. And they're babies, they're infants. The parents go on there and pretend to interact with things like this unborn infant. It's weird. But anyway, let me not digress. Still born into non-nuclear families. So this is a generation that's going to have 2-income households and lots of blends in their households. Very, very different parenting model. Real adjustable kid and a kid that moves. When I say move to different communities, right, they tend to have like obviously as families shift and change and the economy and those jobs become shorter and shorter and shorter, the likelihood that their parents have moved for work is very high. Or had to move into the post-secondary realm of a large city. So all of a sudden you've got a kid who maybe probably isn't living in the same community where they were born or close to their extended family. So family is no longer a biological thing for this kid, right? It's the people you choose. It's people you choose to around you. And with social media now, they can stay in contact with them very easily, no matter where they are in the world. So family is a way more global than a local construct. All of them went to university, all of them went for a million things. All of them are so bloody educated, it's shocking. We knew that education was a real differentiator for baby boomers. It's not as much a differentiator for this group because they've all got it. This group tracks to have 80% of their population educated in a post-secondary institution. That's a shocking and staggering amount. And does our economy look like that? Not quite. Our economy has lots of jobs in all sorts of realms, not all in that university educated space. And so one of the things that we feel right now is a little bit of a structural mismatch between labor supply and demand, where we're slightly overeducated population. Does that make sense? Especially in rural communities. All right. And let's talk about the way they learn, because the 4 things. How many of you remember the very first operating system you had to deal with on the computer? How many of you was it? Anybody have DOS? Or were we talking Windows 95? Okay. How many of you, don't lie to me here, how many of you still have a Windows 95 manual? Right? Here's the thing about the way generations learn. Is there is a generation, the Windows 95 generation, who got the manual and actually bloody read it. Probably dog-eared some of the pages, so they could easy access it, and they kept it on a shelf. They've never opened it a day in their lives, but they probably moved it 3 times too. Then there's a generation that looks at the thing, pops its head, and just starts clicking. That's this generation. So the trial and error learner model comes along with what happens when you change operating systems at least annually. They'll stop reading the manual. Those of you who have standard operating procedures, I'm guessing in your job you've got a ton of them. Good luck when you write those things down and say, here's the manual of standard operating procedures, because you're laughing inside yourself when you hand them the manual, because you know damn well humans don't read things. Not anymore, they just start clicking. Right, so they need that catch and release kind of learning too, is another form of this. This is catch and release is when you learn on YouTube. So I taught at the Red Deer College, and I taught at the U of A at the Augustana campus in Camrose, and I was at Camrose. Kid comes into class, and he's kind of, you know, fabulous. I say, how you doing? He's like, I'm so awesome. I changed out the P-trap in my house today. I said, you did? Good on you. He said, are you really good at that stuff? It's like, no, I got Google. I Googled. I did the entire thing off Google. I said, so you learn how to, you know, like uncouple that, take it out, treat it, like all of it. He's like, oh yeah, all the things. I'm like, wait a minute, look at you go. You come to my house. He goes, no, you don't have high school. This is a generation that learns a thing to apply it in that moment and does not retain it. Because why on earth would they retain it? They can just Google it again. It would be like carrying around with you like luggage, everything you ever learned. They know it's impossible. The volume of data they have to work with over the course of a lifetime is so great. Now, boomers, I love them, but they can still recite something they learned in school. They can still recite a piece of poetry they learned in elementary school. They will never forget because they were taught using memorization, recitation, right? And there's a place for some of that. You do need to do some memorization. You can't memorize all the things anymore. And so getting discerning, well, which things you really commit to and which things you don't is an art form. Now, if you're training employees, I'm going to you because I kind of know your space is probably a bit better than others here. There are certain things you need them to bloody memorize. Memorize this thing. Security processes, for example. Please do not have to go to the book every time. And there are other things you need them to catch and release. Creating systems of learning in the workplace that adjust to the volume of information that people have to learn is critical. Otherwise, why would they stay? Because they just get overwhelmed and then they tap out. And here's what I noticed we've done. Is we haven't accommodated boomers well, who have that memorization kind of trend in their brain. They're like, maybe I'll just memorize everything. We don't always also look at them and say, this, 10 out of 10, you memorize that. This, 1 out of 10, you'll need it once every 10 years. Here's where you'll find it. We get discerning about that so that they don't have to. Because a new employee to your organization who just wants to please you comes in there thinking, oh my gosh, that's the volume I have to manage. Can't do it. They won't tell you that, because that creates shame, right? That creates a shame response in them. Nobody will tell you. They just leave. Cool. This is a generation that's had a microwave in their house their whole life. I just want you to imagine how microwaves have ruined society. I do. Before microwaves, what happened with leftovers? You had 2 choices. What were they? Eat them cold, or take 1,000,000 years to make it. May as well make a meal for the whole damn family, same amount of time. Now, I have a microwave. I can create anything in 2.5 minutes. Good luck creating a patient worker waiting for opportunity, okay? Good luck with that. I can Google anything. How many of you Google the TV shows you're actively watching? Find out what happens after the part that you're watching, right? We know now the parallel experience of viewers is almost better for them like than one. So now they're designing TV shows so that you can Google. They create little kind of gaps in the story so you can Google what's going on because they know what you're doing and Google tracks everything you do. You know this. So what happens right now is we have a generation that has never not been able to access everything at the end of their fingertips always. And they come to work in perfect but beautiful workplaces. And they go, where is this SOP? And we go, yeah, no, we haven't got those all done. They're like, what the hell's wrong? Google's got everything. And ChatGPT could build it for you right now.
Mhm.
Also, it can. It really can. If you get a chance,
Yeah.
get ChatGPT to write some of your SOPs if they're not done. Because we can't get to it all. We can't get to it all. And this is interesting. So this is a whole generation going instant. I asked you this question, I want an instant answer. You can't Google it and find it immediately. I kind of start to think you have lost the plot. And my perception of you as an organization shifts on them. They're a fascinating group. Also, real trend movement from a collective mindset in the baby boom. You have 4 kids in a house with only 3 bedrooms, you have 1 bathroom, no lock on it. That's a collective mindset. The collective mindset considers each other different, right? And the collective mindset, I know what shape my dad is in by the way he pulls into the yard, because I'm used to tuning in. Right? I know to think empathetically about what's going on around me because I've always had to. You get to the individualism mindset. This is a kid, by the way, growing up in 2,500 square feet with their own bedroom, their own bathroom, their own television, and their own car. The minute they can 16 car. Right? The minute they turn, like immediately they have a TV and an entire entertainment center in their bedroom for themselves. We have built perfect individualistic minds. But they don't all imagine what it is to take one from a team. That's why team sports have been such a hugely important part of their development, right? Because they don't have to live a team sport at home. And making them translate that to the workplace, this is what I think is interesting. We used to know that if a kid had team sports on their resume, they'd be pretty good in a team environment work. I don't think that makes that jump all the time. You still have to assess for that. If it's important that they be team players, you have to assess for that. Make no assumptions. Make no assumptions. Cool. Last point on this group is when we raised up the baby boomers, we really taught them to give, to be givers. We're like, you go to work, you hustle, you let them know you're worth it, you do the things. This generation, we looked at them and said, do what you love, the money will follow. Express your own awesomeness. Take no shit. Those of you who have ever been employers know that is actually a little bit of a frustrating thing to deal with sometimes. Right? Because what we have done that's wonderful is given them a message they're attached to and they value. Right? That satisfaction matters for them, engagement matters for them. Feeling like they can be seen and heard in their workplace in a whole way matters to them. And it should matter to all of us because they're healthier workers as a result. However, we still have to help them bridge into the reality that are our current businesses and say, this is what I can offer you reasonably. And we have to get far more specific about our expectations. We have to say it out loud, the things that we have never had to say out loud because they can be assumed. We have to say it out loud, set our expectations so bloody clearly at the early part of the contract. So that if they don't think they can meet those expectations, they can tell you. And if they do agree, and they consent to meeting those expectations, then there's accountability inherent in it. But you can't assume that they're going to show up this way and never say it, and then give them how they don't. Go ahead. You're good. Last generation, not quite dominating the labor markets just yet, right? So this is a generation that's still quite young, but let's brace ourselves because they're coming. And this is a wacky group. I just want to be really clear about this generation. So if you can imagine this generation has had a set of experiences that could not be duplicated. You can't even imagine this, right? Let's take it from now going backwards in time. COVID. So the air is going to kill you. The air is coming for you, in fact. And it's going to travel all over the world in a matter of days. And there's not much you can do to avoid it. And you better cloister yourself, or at least fun. Innumerable school shootings. So your school's going to get you. Complete degradation of our environmental sustainability. Surfacing constantly in every news item, right? That everything, the air, the water, the earth that we need to live is being contaminated such that it may not sustain us much longer. And that the rising temperatures are eventually gonna cause such violent weather experiences that our homes are probably no longer viable. That's a routine message in their daily news, 24-hour news cycle. Counting that, that's just in case you missed it one day, it's coming for the next, 9/11. And all of them are events, like this is the 24/7 news cycle has been a real disservice to this generation particularly. Because as we leaned into it, which is really only probably over the last 20 years, it's become a competitive industry, which means they're becoming increasingly sensational to get our attention and to hold it. And the clickbait, right? Here are the 17 reasons you could be dying right now. Click on this. So I can pound these advertisements at you. And every one of the advertisements has dire warnings, like here are the, if your ears are ringing, trust me, it could be something serious. And all of us all of a sudden go, my ears are totally ringing right now. It's happening to me. That has a material impact on the generation of children. Like, let's not pretend this isn't hitting our kids. The degree of uncertainty we have about economic stability, the belief that there's some conspiracy behind it all, it's going to unfold and cost us everything anytime. We're all just sheep being led to the slaughter. That sentiment is pervasive right now in our culture, in our society, in our news, in our dialogue. And these kids are in that pressure cooker every single day. So if they're not super cheerful, I wouldn't be surprised. Right? This is a tough generation to engage with in the K-12 system, in the post-secondary system too. They are looking for change everywhere they go. They're looking for hope everywhere they go. They're looking for inspiration. They're looking for somebody to say, we're going to stop this insanity and change, turn this car around. And they're not finding it everywhere they go. So I'm not saying that as an indictment or anything like that. I'm just saying that it's a reality. It's a reality. They tend to have higher levels of generalized anxiety. Now, we started to see those levels spike with the baby boomers. I just want to be clear about this. It's not like it was like nothing, and then boom. It's actually at the beginning of the baby boom generation that we started to see this expression of anxiety. That could be a reporting issue. Prior generations may not have reported. That's a possibility. I just want to be clear. This isn't clean data. But this generation, it has kind of marginally increased since baby boomer to this generation. And so what we know is that they're packing around a ton of worry, and it's changing the way they show up in the world. I want to talk about the algorithm. This is a kid that has had social media at their fingertips, and it has only gotten increasingly sophisticated as it goes, right? You know what I'm talking about. The algorithm is a thing. So the algorithm works like this. If you go onto the Google or the Facebook or wherever the hell you go, and you Google ringing in my ears, what's going to happen? You're bombarded with the ringing of the ears. And if you click on even one thing, so let's say you click on a link that says that ringing in your ears might be caused by the government. You click on that one thing, and then it delivers to you more of that. And you click on that one. And so here's the thing, is that what we start to experience is a distorted world. And it's not distorted because the world has gone into government conspiracies that make your ears ring. It's distorted, like we're starting to see the world as we fear it. Not as it is, as we fear it. Because what do we click on? You go ahead and click on all of the, I want more couch cushions, that stuff isn't going to freak out. It's when we go, is chemtrails getting me? That all of a sudden the returns on that convince us increasingly that that fear is real and robust and that it's legit and you should bloody take action. I don't know what everybody clicks on, but I want you to imagine that this is a kid now who is preparing for the zombie apocalypse, right? They're pretty damn sure they should be prepping because the returns that they get from the algorithm are not a balanced perspective on the earth. They're actually a very concentrated distortion. I am not saying that the stuff they're clicking on isn't possibly true. I'm saying that what we see coming back to us tells us a story that might not be accurate. Okay. The other thing about them, this cloud-based, crowdsourced, and content creators. This is a really crucial issue. When y'all grew up, I grew up on a farm, we had 3 channels, one was French, 2 were fuzzy, like. If you went to your neighbor's house, the chances are they were watching the same show you were watching, and the other neighbor was watching the same show yet, and then you'd go to school the next day and everybody would talk about the same show. We had a real shared sense of our media, right? We had a real shared sense of culture. There was nothing, you all got fed the same thing. And then you had cable, and it was like, now we could break into camps based on what you looked at, right? Some people were in this camp, some people were in that camp. Now we have online, infinite streaming services. We have now people disconnecting from what's being supplied to them and saying, why don't I just build my own content? I don't need to look at any of them. So it is feeding that individualism kind of pattern. But the other thing that's kind of fun is they just don't wait for you to create meaning for them. They'll create it for themselves. So when you say, wait for it, this will be coming for you. We've got a whole committee working on it. They're like, whatever, click, click, click. Here it is now, done. And those boomers in the room lose their ever-loving mind, right? So recently, I worked with an organization. They're building this video campaign, talking about all their awesome internal leadership stories. And they charted a 6-month project timeline, and they were bringing the bodies in and 85 contractors. And one young worker went, AI, could you give me a hand with this? Clicked along and got basically a video version of ChatGPT to generate the entire video series in an afternoon.
Or less time.
Right? And then walks this up to the boss and goes, there you go. And the boss goes, but this should be harder. Like I can't think this fast. I can't work this fast. We can't integrate this fast. The committee's still talking. This is an interesting dilemma. Process and results now are all of a sudden changing. The process of getting to if I can get you the same results in a third of the time, do I make the same money? I would like that. Are we paying for outcomes? Are we paying for objectives? Or are we paying for bums and seats? Challenge to the modern organization is to really understand what it takes to produce the outcomes you're producing and make sure that you're paying for process. If I can get it done in a third of the time, is that okay? It is capitalism in action. We kind of hate it when it's in our own house, right? We're just like, whoa, 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 no. Right? Slow it down. Let me think about this. So this is a really interesting generation. Last thing I want to say about them, from a social responsibility perspective, this is the first generation that has really taken corporate social responsibility to the next level. It is not an optics game anymore. So the last hiring campaign that I was involved with was going after a generation kind of close to this. And candidates came in, and 4 of the 5 final candidates asked us for our diversity scorecard, our inclusion scorecard. They asked us for our corporate social responsibility scorecard, our environmental commitments. They wanted a complete report out to them before they would consider a second interview. And as an organization, I remember going, we haven't offered you a second interview yet. And she goes, yeah, don't waste your time until I see you. And I remember going, I'm the person in power here. And this person inside me, I don't think you are. They know what they want, and they want to have a values alignment with the organization they choose. And they want it to be robust. If it's for optics only, they are here to mess with you. They're here to say, if you're not walking that talk, I'm not sitting in that chair. Or remoting in from home, which is what I prefer to do. Go ahead and click it. All right, so contextually, let's just start the wrap up here. We are moving from a place that had a persistent, consistent structure that made good sense to everybody, and everybody had the shared assumptions about it, to a place that is far more responsive. What is the task in front of me? How fast can I bang that out? Catch and release mindsets. Can I get ChatGPT to do it? Going from prescribed to more natural hierarchies. So a prescribed hierarchy is when I say I have legitimate power in this place to tell you what to do. To a more organic or natural expression of that, which goes, who's got the most expertise in this space right now? Because that's who's going to get this done. Moving from kind of a command and control mindset of you serve the boss to a servant leadership mindset that says the boss serves you. boss's job is to get you the resources and the things that you need to achieve your objectives. And we go from that kind of vertical ladder mindedness that went along with that 60-year time horizon into a very different model that says, I'm gonna have multiple income streams, I'm gonna move laterally, I might move down, I'm gonna move up, I'm gonna move to a contract position and come back in. Sky's the limit. I am not attached to that same kind of conventional mindset. And moving away from do you fit in here to a more diversity-minded approach that says, do you add something we don't already have here? This is the generation that's going to be vetting to see whether or not you are embracing the qualitative value of diversity because they know it yields better organizational outcomes. Which let me stop here. And if you want to vault 3 slides forward, go to the banking one that has my contact information.
I just go back here.
Yeah, go 2 more. 1 more. There we go. I think the bottom line is, you've got to understand that labor supply coming in the door, the differences amongst them and their relationship with work, recognizing that each one has value, by the way. In no way do I think one generation outperforms another, or is a better fit or better match than another. In fact, it's when you cobble them together carefully and you get the best possible outcomes, because each comes with particular kind of perspective on the world of work that rounds out your work. And you've got to kind of start to look down the pipe into the future. Hold on to this reality, right? Really, really committed to this moment in your organization. But look down that line and ask yourself as a leader, what change do you need to make sure that you're creating a workplace that is sustainable as we see the next generations in. Let's have your questions.
So why don't we just do, before the end of the meeting, why don't we just do a quick roundtable, introduce who we are, where we're from, and any comments, thoughts, questions or feedback. And let's start with Ian.
Do you want to start with them?
Yeah.
So Ian Baxter, principal of Fox Creek School, and there was many aha moments. We have a school where we have our school secretary who's